now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. Oh, my mind, now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. You got control of me, break my barricades. Walls are crumbling grounds, they shake. You came to save, but it's way too late. Every single time you stay, I cave.
And we are back with another episode of Neurodivergent News Live. We are having a blast from week to week, talking about the things that matter to the neurodivergent community, to the driven individuals out there that are looking for people that have the same perspective as they do, and they're looking for maybe a little bit of help, a little bit of advice, or just a little camaraderie. So this week, we do not have a special guest, and you're starting to get more and more familiar with our permanent panel. I'm Deanna Brakefield, owner of Lionheart Kingdom Marketing, as well as a host here. I am advocate, parent, entrepreneur. I have with me Jeremy Brakefield. Take a second and let them hear your voice, sir.
Hello, I am Jeremy Brakefield, founder of Lionheart Kingdom and husband to Deanna Brakefield and host of this here fine show.
And we almost always have with us as well the amazing Stone G. And this week, I'm really going to shine the spotlight on him. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a second to introduce yourself and then tell him what we're going to be talking about that is so close to your heart.
Good morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you happen to be in the world. My name is Stone G. I'm a counselor, and what I focus on is working with neurodivergent, driven, visionary entrepreneurs and professionals. Today, we're going to be talking about strength-based focus as regards to how we operate on the planet. And Deanna, I'm not going to steal any of your thunder. I'm going to leave the questions to you, and I'll just get into a natural flow of possible answers and a possible perspective that we can take for those answers. I think the biggest thing that we're going to get out of the conversation today is a reminder of a way that we can see ourselves such that we have more strength and are able to thrive in our everyday life and be able to notice what is ableist thinking. If we don't have a process for noticing ableist thinking, we can live a life that is a lie, which takes away from our brilliance, it takes away from our energy. So these are some of the things that we'll be discussing today.
I couldn't put it much better. So, to put it in simpler terms, we are talking about rewriting the narrative. And when we say narrative, we mean the story or the way that we think from a very neurotypical perspective to a strengths-based approach, which is not often done in the neurotypical world. So we're shifting away from that deficit or disabled perspective and recognizing that just because we're different doesn't mean that we're not amazing and awesome. So Stone is a counselor. We're talking about rewriting the story. This all makes a whole lot of sense. I would like to start though with, you mentioned ableism. Now, that's a word that I hadn't even heard until 2 years ago. So would you please start by defining that for us?
Sure. Ableism is it's a context whereby there's a specific way we are meant to think and live. And that context is created by what is being neurotypical. For instance, if we look at it through the lens of race, there's a way that maybe white people will think, and there's a way that maybe Black people will think. But in our culture, there might be a dominance as far as the way white people think. And so if we take that back to neurodiversity, there is a dominance as far as the way neurotypical people are meant to think, and that dominance, it overrides different ways of thinking. So I gave an example of how it may occur. And one of the challenges with ableism is that this way of thinking becomes embedded in neurodiverse people. And so because they don't think in the same way, they feel that they are inherently wrong, inherently broken. Mm-hmm. And this type of thinking will ultimately result in your death.
So if I understand what you said, you're basically saying that looking at the universe through this neurotypical lens, instead of going, I am highly emotionally geared towards being able to sense the energy in a room, I'm too sensitive. It becomes a negative instead of a superpower. Or instead of, I can shift my focus rapidly from task to task without missing details, I get too distracted.
Yeah, that's an excellent example. And being able to notice when that's happening internally is where we get the power to be able to generate our own narrative.
Okay. So you and I had some correspondence before this broadcast, and one of the things that stood out to me was a question that we asked back and forth, and you'd said, what narratives have you absorbed about what it means to be neurodivergent? So can you simplify that question for our audience so that they can kind of apply it to themselves?
Sure. If we look at some of the myths that we deal with on a daily basis, for instance, I'll make an honest statement. I used to think that there was something very wrong with me because I knew that based on the things that people were sharing around me, that I didn't think the same way that they did. I knew 100%. They would be talking about, say they were talking about going out to a particular event and how much fun it was going to be. And listening to that always brought up dread for me. I couldn't think of anything worse than to going to a loud event with lots of noise and screaming people who were excited, and I didn't understand why they were so excited about a particular thing. And so because I was different and no one told me that the reason why you're different is because of this, I assumed that I was wrong. So I gave an example that's relevant to me, and I think our listeners, they're going to have different variants of this type of example. And so if they can look at the difference that they notice for themselves and then just realize, hey, you think differently. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. You just think differently. And if we can harness your brilliance and apply that in a different way, wow, there's some real results that happen for that. And in my case, because I realized that I didn't enjoy crowds, but I do have a profound skill set at being able to notice multiple things, in particular human behavior. I'm able to notice behavior patterns and then speak into that listening. For instance, when someone says one particular thing, especially if they're neurotypical, that's not exactly what they mean. There's usually a story underneath that. So that's one of the skill sets that I developed as a neurodiverse person.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Jeremy, you're being awful quiet, and I know that this is a topic that you were excited to talk about. So come on, engage with us just a little bit.
Yeah, well, I am excited about this topic because for the most part, it's supposed to be tools for living in a typical world, and I feel like that this strength-based approach to it is one of not necessarily the first tool that we've really focused on trying to give out tools, but I feel like this whole show could wind up being tools for a huge plethora of people out there. And for me, that's the whole point of all of this. We can sit here and talk about how things are bad, how it should be better, and all of this. But at the same time, we have a world that we have to function in. If we can learn how to make things a little easier on ourselves, then I think that will make things better for neurodivergent people in the long run. And so that's why I have been excited all week for this topic, because I feel like if we can throw out a bunch of different tools, yes, there's not going to be one tool that's going to work for everybody. But if you throw out 5 or 6 different ideas of things that can be useful, a lot of people are going to be able to grab onto that, and it's going to be able to help them. And for me, that's the whole point of the show, is being able to give people the knowledge and the skills that they need to not feel so lost in this world that right now, like it or not, it is a neurotypical world. I mean, it was made for neurotypicals, essentially by neurodivergence, but we can get into that at a different time. But the world is, sorry, this is one of those things where I can tend to ramble on and on about. So,
I'd like to pull a couple of things out of what you said and direct them towards Stone, unless Stone would just like to speak to what you said himself.
Yeah, I would. Jeremy and I are sensitive to the energy of words. Mm-hmm. And what he has shared is a brilliant segue into looking at a couple of words. For instance, coping versus thriving. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us understand coping, whereby we will be in an environment and look at the resources that we need to mimic the expected behaviors. Mm-hmm. And that takes a lot of spoons. A strength-based approach would look, the way it would look is we examine our strengths, we examine our brilliance and the skill sets that we know that are amazing, that also give us more spoons. And we focus on that as a way of living, as opposed to just coping. And so when we focus on our strengths, then we thrive. And here's an example. If I'm asking both of you a question, for instance, Deanna, I might ask you, what are Jeremy's strengths, and what have you noticed that when he focuses on this particular thing, he's in his flow? So what would be your answer to that?
I would have to say that when I can minimize the distractions in his environment and allow him to be creative, he comes up with the most phenomenal coding structures as well as storylines for the video games he designs.
So he's an ideator, and his sweet.
He's an architect.
Beautiful. So an architect, and he's creative at the same time. Fantastic. And you've already identified how you can support him to be in his flow. And so, Jeremy, when you look at what, same question for you, what are some of the things that you notice that Deanna absolutely loves, gives her more spoons, and it enables her to thrive?
Helping people, absolutely. For her, when she gets off of a call with somebody, that everything has went exactly the way it was supposed to. Everything went beautifully. It's like she's walking on air for the next 20 minutes, hour. I mean, it's an amazing thing, and she lights up.
That's fantastic. So you also have already tapped into and noticed what you can do to support her so that she is thriving. Both of you have done that, and both of you are focusing on that for one another. And that is a wonderful example of a way for us to thrive. We in a previous episode, we were talking about this idea of fixing autism.
Yes.
And rather than which is an ABA model, rather than fixing someone, which is a lie because we are broken. If we take this narrative, like both of you have identified your strengths, and we take the narrative where, well, my partner and myself, we don't have deficits, we have strengths, and I want to support my partner in their strength so that they can be vibrant, so they can thrive, so that they can be all that they are. So this is a way to rewrite the narrative. The whole idea of a strength-based approach when it comes to neurodiversity is that we are not trying to fix anyone. We're merely looking at our strengths, and we are celebrating and creating environments so that people are able to focus on things that give them more spoons.
So this may be a little off base.
Let me poke some in here real quick. For me, I think if we can focus on one particular word, and for me, this word is understand. Autism can't be fixed, but I feel like it can be understood if we take the time to listen to each other. No two autistics are alike. So no book that you can necessarily put out is instantly going to have the tools for them. But I feel like there is so much similarity that if we can pull the veneer away and look at the underlying structure, that these tools that Stone has, they can be applied in a plethora of ways that will allow us to be ourselves in this world.
I like what you're saying about understanding, and I would also like to add reverence and celebration, because it has a different vibration. So Jeremy, if you are reverencing Deanna, that feels a bit different than understanding. And if you are celebrating Deanna, that's a bit different than understanding. Understanding is great, but if we're looking at thriving, these two words could be added into our ingredient list to grow.
So and this actually feeds even more into what I was going to ask. It may be a bit off base, but it sounds like for neurodivergence, the individuals of the community to thrive, we almost are required to have an interdependence with one another that the neurotypical community seems to shun.
Well, isn't that how we're supposed to be?
Well, yeah, exactly. It's more invasive than what the neurotypical does. It's more a Western culture thing that has this individualistic perspective. If we go back to antiquities and we look at the way our forefathers lived, collectivism was the way they breathed. It was the way they lived. Everyone lived that way because there was this inherent knowledge that the way we thrive was through collectivism rather than what the Western culture has with capitalism and individualism.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's rare that one of us has something to say. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just, we talked about the example between couples in ways that we can create an ecosystem where people are able to thrive, and then there's also the individual responsibility of noticing our thoughts. For instance, maybe I stub my toe or a particular situation doesn't go in the way that I expected. And maybe the first thought that pops into my mind is I might say, oh, that was stupid, or I'm stupid, or oh, I'm blah, 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 or oh, I'm slow. And if we can start conditioning ourselves to catch those moments and then reframe them immediately when things happen that we're, for instance, maybe you're speaking with a prospect in your business and maybe they're autistic, but something happens and in your conversation you don't come together, and maybe they blow up at you, or maybe they say I never want to talk to you again, or whatever. That rejection may cause one to feel that there's something wrong with self when there isn't. And it's a brilliant opportunity, a wonderful opportunity to be able to reframe and say, okay, well, that relationship didn't go forward, but it has nothing to do with my worth. It has nothing to do with my ability. So being able to reframe these ideas are going to support us to not it's not possible for us to not have a ableism, because that's the pond we're swimming in. We're always going to notice, well, we won't always notice the waters that are going through our gills, but we can start to become aware. So by reframing our internal language, we can then start to have more strength, more autonomy, more power in generating a life that works for us.
Right. So it sounds like what you're saying is that while we have incurred generational trauma, this is a generational fix. And if, as parents, we can be very, very aware of the way that we're engaging with our neurodivergent children, we can actually stop some of those negative narratives from even implanting themselves.
Yeah. So what are some of the myths or some of the things that you've noticed that people say? And it's not that I want to get on a conversation about what's negative, but it's that I want to identify what are some of the standard things that you hear that maybe aren't true.
Oh gosh, directed itself, I've heard, you're stupid, those things don't make sense, your brain doesn't work right, how did you come up with that? That's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. And it's all those rejection statements that are meant to make you feel bad for what you thought about.
So let's just take one of those. And if someone says you're stupid, that has nothing to do with you. What's a reframe that you can use when someone says something like
that? The one I usually fall on is, I'm not stupid, you didn't understand me.
Yeah, that could be one. What's another one?
Jeremy, help me here. You're the one that has to listen to me talk bad about myself the most. I hate being put on the spot. I'll tell you that straight up. No, but like.
Well. Here, this is why we're doing this, because in speculating and asking these questions, we're starting to notice our internal dialogue, and then by doing the work, we can then have something in our toolbox, right? So you came up with one tool, and it's not like there's a right answer.
They didn't understand me is still negative because it puts the deficit on my communication skills.
It could be, but it's still a step away from it. It's in the opposite direction from you saying that you're stupid. So the questions are designed to support you to come up with more tools that you can leverage, that you pull out of your toolbox, and the more tools you can have, the more you use them, the more proficient you become with them. It means that you can go powerfully through your day, and because you're using these tools, you have a community around you who then starts to see you from the strength-based perspective, as opposed to the narrative that neurotypicals tend to make available. So let's stay with this, because this is really useful.
Okay.
So you came up with.
I was going to say another one other than the they misunderstood me. That's usually what I fall on, is that I must not have communicated well. I mean, you can ask Jeremy. That's usually I over explain, re-explain, reword and re-explain, trying to force understanding.
But that's generally what we do for the most part. Like I'm convinced that one of the stigmas of autistic ADHD people, where we say the same thing multiple times, I feel like that is a learned behavior, because you say something to a neurotypical once. Well, you didn't say it in the way that their mind thinks, so they have no clue what you just said. So you have to explain it again. And if they still didn't get it, then you have to explain it again. And so I feel like because I know for me, a lot of times if I'm talking, I've got to repeat the same thing 3-4 times before I feel like I've made myself understood. And I feel like that's the reason, because it takes 3-4 times of explaining this, because it's like, okay, well, let me explain this from standing over here to the left. Okay, you didn't understand that. Okay, now let me explain it from standing over here to the right. Okay, you still didn't get it. Okay, let me climb up on this box and explain it. Oh, okay, you're up here on the box. Okay, you get it from up here. Okay, great. And you never know where you have to explain from. And for me, I view that whole thing, because most people are subjective. It's almost, at least it seems to me, the average person has almost an inability to be objective.
I feel like we need to flip it on Jeremy now. He seems like he wants to talk.
Yeah, well,
because
this is fantastic.
Take the whole. I'll even take her previous statement. I was stupid, or you're stupid, or whatever. That is a subjective statement at the end of the day, because
a lie.
Why is that person stupid? The thought, the emotion, whatever, it's coming from the fact of you did not know a specific piece of information in a specific way at a specific moment. Okay, that is subjective as all hell. I mean, because you have 3 different steps where you have to be in a specific place to understand something in each step of the way. And for me, I feel like that's one of the things that we have to do. We have to be able to step back and go, no, I wasn't stupid. I just didn't have that information that you need. That's not my fault. That's not your fault. It just is what it is. If you come to me and you ask me, what time is the sun going down in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada? Well, I don't know. So I can't tell you that information. I can try and find it out, but until I find it out, that's a deficit on me. Or is it? Because it's just simply a piece of information. Not. It's just a piece of information I did not have. It's like we have this idea that ignorance is a bad thing. Ignorance in and of itself is not bad. Continued ignorance is bad. Willful ignorance is bad. Because at that point, you understand that you don't know, and you choose to not educate yourself. You choose to not learn. At that point, I feel like that is bad.
Have we gone down a bit of a rabbit hole on this topic?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
As soon as I start talking, we're heading down the rabbit hole. I mean.
Okay, but no.
Yeah, it's all right.
This is the internalized conversation that Jeremy has in his head with almost every interaction that he has with people. Like, we've had conversations about this. He will make himself bananas to the point he does nothing.
Yeah. Well, you brought up a really interesting perspective. And you have children. And there are some topics that you might speak about with your children. And maybe you might speak with your children in a particular way so that they can understand, because their understanding and their experience on the planet is different from someone who is more mature, someone who's older, someone in their 40s or 50s, so on and so forth. And that's one of the things that I've noticed in speaking with different cultures and with different neurologies. So as an example, when speaking with someone who's neurotypical, I might use analogies. to explain something so that they can get the visceral impact of it. Whereas when I'm speaking with someone who is similar to us, I'm going to be more direct. I'm going to say specifically X, Y, Z. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. I'm not going to waste time with analogies because we're not interested in that. We just want to know who, what, when, where, why exactly. So these are nuances. It's not a deficit. And one of the reasons why I was laughing is because I was remembering, and this is not to say that a particular people group or cultural group is a simple in any way. They're just different. But sometimes I'll remember the interactions with my dog. So my dog might do something that is ridiculous, like run out into oncoming traffic. And immediately what happens is I might be filled with dread or anxiety or something like that because I'm afraid my dog is going to get harmed. And if I yell out at my dog, then my dog, of course, is reacting to that energy. And he's not going to stop. He's going to run faster away because he's afraid. And so if we can be aware of our audience, if we can be aware of the person that we're engaging with, understanding their behavior model of the world, then we can communicate with them more effectively. And that's one of the opportunities or benefits to being neurodiverse, because we're able to hold concurrent dimensionality. I'm not sure if I'm saying that word right. We're multidimensional beings where we can have multiple perspectives concurrently.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
We have to. We've had to develop that as a survival mechanism. So I enjoy your rants, Jeremy, because you bring all the stuff.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So you were talking about there are certain interplay dynamics between certain personality and perspective types. Are there some maybe generalized types that you could define that might help put some more framework around this? For if you interact with person type A, maybe you can expect this sort of reaction and so on.
Yeah, we could have that kind of conversation. That's I guess the
kind of conversation Chamber likes to have.
Yeah. This is a behavioral profiling conversation, and there are different behavioral profiling models. The one I use is DISC, and I've modified DISC to be relevant to neurodivergent people. So I guess I could call it DISC Plus. It doesn't have a name.
I think you've mentioned it before.
With DISC, yeah. So DISC stands for it's an acrostic. D is dominant. It's a dominant personality style. I is influencer or inspirational. S is supportive. And C is conscientious. And they both have their resourceful and unresourceful context. For instance, I, influencer, its resourceful context is it comes up with a lot of ideas. They're highly inspirational. Put in a group, these people are going to come up, they're going to be able to ideate, and they're going to inspire everyone. Their unresourceful context is that they tend to chase all the shiny things. It's like a puppy in the yard when it sees a leaf. It starts chasing one leaf, but the wind is blowing in other leaves, and so it can't. It's just chaos. So each one of these behavioral profiles has a different focus, both unresourceful and resourceful. And we are not just one thing. We are multiple things. So that is a foundation. And then putting in neurodiversity, well, not on top of it, but mixing it through. When you start to notice someone's language pattern, then you get an insight into what is their secret story. And by speaking to that secret story, you're able to connect much more deeply with that person. For instance, Jeremy, if Deanna is going off on a rant about how she made a mistake, whatever, and initially you're listening to be polite, but I would imagine at some point it gets to be tedious. And you want to say, hey, that's not true. You're not incapable, or whatever it is you want to say. All that happened was XYZ, and now you're making it mean this other thing. You're actually really wonderful. You're powerful, blah, 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 blah.
Generally, I don't really censor myself when it comes to that point. I get straight to the point and I go, no, stop that. That's not true, is it? And I make her go through the steps, and no, it's not true. I really am. And because one of the rules I have is I protect all of those that are essentially within my sphere of influence, whether it's from outside influences or whether it's from internal influences. If you're sitting there beating yourself up because you think you did something wrong, and I'm like, you did nothing wrong. You didn't have a piece of information to make a certain thing successful. That's not a fault on you. Or someone that you told to do a thing, they didn't listen to you. How is that your fault? If you tell a person, if you walk into the middle of the road, you're going to get hit by a car. When they walk into the middle of the road and get hit by the car, it's not your fault. You told them what would happen. They did it anyway.
Yeah.
The point was,
Yeah, so
yes, he does, Stone.
I can hear that. So if I were to summarize or kind of encapsulate everything that we've been discussing, what we're looking at is, here's the impact of ableism. It brings this negative connotation, which is, it's not true. We construct these identities that are false, and we have a way of transforming it. Number one, by changing our internal narrative, and number two, by having a community around us who also supports, edifies, celebrates this true narrative, which is the shining of our brilliance. I think every episode we're always talking about community.
Okay, so I mean we are, but
Community,
that's very important
love,
to us.
communication.
Many of us grew up isolated inside the neurotypical communities. And so finding people who feel and think like we do is very important to us. That community is very real. But you mentioned the brilliance inside of us. Would that be that unconventional genius that you've hinted at in previous episodes? That thing that's a little out of alignment to neurotypical, but just makes us amazing?
Well, Jeremy, he talks about context quite a bit.
Okay.
And so the short answer to your question is yes. And when I reflect on, so one of my children, language is not his thing. Spoken word is not really his thing yet.
Mm-hmm.
But he does have this resonance about him. He has this way of exuding love. When you're in his presence, you feel celebrated. So the way he communicates is different. He's quite tactile. He loves hugs and you feel whatever concerns you have about your inadequacies, they just melt away in his presence. So I'm giving a little bit more description to what you were asking.
Would it be safe to say that he almost emits love?
Exactly. He's the embodiment of it. If you ever wanted to see love in action, you just witness this child. You observe this child. So if I were to judge him according to neurotypical standards, all I would notice is, oh, well, he doesn't speak the way everyone else speaks. But because I'm tapping into the things that he enjoys focusing, which is deep, purposeful connection and love, I can really focus on that with him. And so that's what makes a difference to him. He wants people to feel good about themselves, not because of what they do, just because they're humans. And that's a wonderful thing to observe. And I think if, let's say you have a practitioner or a parent or an ally that is trying to figure out a way of having more strength-based tools in their toolbox. Well, one of the things that they can do is reflect back these positive strengths and attributes that they see in the person that they're meant to protect, to support, to enable them to grow.
So what does that look
if
like?
You have a child.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, fine. So let's say you have a child that maybe they're very skilled at noticing patterns. They can put together puzzles, or maybe they have a talent for linguistics, as in they're a polyglot. They pick up languages the way they drink water. So you want to notice those things, celebrate them, but more specifically, notice the areas where they get more spoons. Wherever it is they're getting more spoons, that's how we nurture them, because these areas that we focus on where they normally get more energy is going to enable them to expand.
Okay,
and by expanding that, go ahead.
For example, our youngest son, he is an actual architect. When he was really little, it was Legos. Now it's modeling clay. But when he creates something new and he brings it to our attention, pointing out all of the features, I know when I was a little, I did the same thing. And I was like, that's nice. Now go put it away and go back to your room and stay out of my bubble. Jeremy and I make a concerted effort to be like, oh, yeah, and what about this thing over here that you didn't point out? And he just lights up. And for like the next couple of hours, he is just overflowing with energy and trying to strengthen that connection with Jeremy and I. It can be overwhelming, but it's empowering too.
Yeah, more of that in every area of their life, not just children, but other. So I understand that you work with other neurodivergent clients. Same thing with them. You would notice that whenever you're working with a client and they do something, whatever thing it is that they do, and you start saying, "Wow, that's amazing," and you start letting them know how brilliant it is, they just kind of light up and think, oh, wow, you notice that. And not only do they want to work with you more, but they're going to be more productive in their version of what productivity is in their business. So this goes around and it pays it forward, and we can't do this enough. It's interesting that we have to have the conversation and that we don't do it naturally. But I think because we're having the conversation.
We've touched on it before that at some point that this was natural. And we know it's natural because it's the way small children interact with each other. But at some point culturally, we decided that these were bad traits and started training them out of our children. And it just hasn't washed yet.
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like it's because of somewhere along the way, differences became a bad thing. For some reason, I don't like. I can't exactly put my finger on it, but it feels like somewhere along the way that it became a bad thing. But I feel like at some point in history that the differences were okay. It was what allowed a community to come together, and you had the guys that couldn't go out in the woods and do any hunting. They stayed back and they did the farming, or they did something else, and they let the guys that were the hunters go out and get the meat, because everybody has a place in the community. Everybody's not a hunter. Everybody's not a farmer. Everybody's not a doctor. Everybody's not a lawyer. We all have our place. We've got to find out where our place is. And then, like Stone says, you have to celebrate your place. Like I heard it say at one point, if you're going to be, well, whatever it is you're going to be the best damn whatever it is that you can possibly be. I think it was a ditch digger. If you're going to be a ditch digger, be the best ditch digger you could possibly be. Well, wherever it is that you're supposed to fit in this world, celebrate that. Be there, be that, and be the best that you can. But don't hold up the standard of what everybody else thinks that you should be. Find your place. And for me, I feel like that's not pushed anymore. I have an idea of where you belong. Now you're supposed to get there. And I feel like that's wholly wrong. That it's each individual person has somewhere that they belong, somewhere that they fit in with a group of people. And I feel like we all just have to find that place. When we can all come together like that and balance, I feel like that's when we can actually have things better. But until we do, it's just going to be pointing fingers.
Well, that's why we're talking about rewriting the narrative.
Yeah.
Sorry, Stone, go ahead.
We haven't spoken about this directly, but I'm curious from both of you, if we were to have our own community, a physical community, our own city, our own country, where our children were born into an environment where they were automatically celebrated, nurtured, and reverenced, and they never encountered ableism. What would be some of the things that you'd want to see in a city like that? What's one thing that you would change immediately from what you have right now?
Well, I think the premise of it would have to be a socialist society to start with, because it's as long as your maximum input is put in, your needs and wants are met. So you don't have to worry about things like, can I pay, or do I have the money for the power bill this week? But note I said your maximum effort, not a predefined, this is the quota.
Yeah. I'm looking outside and there are all these butcher birds in the trees right outside my window. The trees I'm on the second floor and they're level. And butcher birds, what they like to do is they'll impale their prey through their beak. For instance, they'll capture a lizard or something like that, and the males take the carcasses and they hang them in the trees, and they use it as a come hither for the females. So I was just watching all these males with their dead pieces of flesh that they captured, and there's so many of them out there, and then the females they're screaming like, oh my gosh, which one do I choose? Which male has the biggest piece of flesh or whatever? And my point in bringing that up is that they have so much abundance. They don't pay a mortgage. And they are thriving every single day. There's a tree down there that has these beautiful, it's called a bottle brush tree, and has these beautiful red plumes. It looks like a big red feather
Mhm.
kind of plume. And they suck on the nectar. They eat the bugs and the other smaller critters and mice and things like that. This place is overflowing with abundance, and all they do is they focus on what it is that they're exceptional at.
Mhm.
So I like your answer about having a socialist community, and I think it could go even further to where we don't have capitalism at all.
Mhm.
Everyone focuses on what they are good at, and we have these containers, and you're not stuck in a particular container. You can move, retrain, and try all these different things, but rather than focusing on money, we agree that our currency is our connection to one another.
Mhm. And I think many individual small groups of neurodivergents would fess up to saying they've had conversations of what would my ideal society look like. I think we've all done it.
At least half a dozen times.
Yeah, it's time.
I agree.
It's not as if we don't have the intellect or the resources. There's nothing stopping us from developing something.
My only concern is
Ourselves.
whether I get to live there or not, because at that point, the world we're trying to create, we're bad influences.
Of course, we get to live there. If we create it, that would be the point.
Sorry, that was my own
Well-
brand of off humor. Apology, Stone.
Yeah, I picked up on that.
But no, I mean, like this. Okay, I feel like this is where the point that I should point out that you have an amazing book that you've referenced several times over the last however many episodes that we've done. I believe it's Navigating Your Autism Diagnosis. Is that
Right.
it? Would you tell us a little bit
Yes.
about your book?
Yeah, sure. It's specific to adults
Mhm.
who have recently had a neurodivergent diagnosis. So it covers the
Okay.
spectrum. And most of the content that's out there now tells you this is what you should do, this is how you should think, this is, blah blah blah. It's very tactical and prescriptive. And a lot of them, even though I don't think they intended to do it, they treat neurodiversity as if it's a monolith. My book doesn't treat neurodiversity in that way. It treats neurodiversity as a spectrum. And rather than offer tactics, it offers frameworks. And it says, here's a framework that you can potentially leverage. This is why it could work. And these are some of the outcomes that you're going to get with this framework, depending on the way you think, depending on the way you consider the world. So if you have this particular type of behavior, this is how this framework is going to work for your scenario. And there's also a workbook that people can leverage where some of the questions that we've asked on this show that are kind of, they might cause you to pause because it's not something that you think about all the time. You get to do that in your workbook on your own time. And so I feel it's a useful endeavor. It's difficult. It's not going to be your average kind of conversation that you have when you're having a coffee with someone.
Well, I mean, we're all the time on this show talking about reaching deeper levels of introspection because that's the only way we grow. It's the only way we get outside of those predefined labels that are, for lack of a better way of putting it, traumatizing all of us into an early grave.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's available on my website, stoneg.com, right? And it's free. So I wanted to make it free because I didn't want there to be barriers to people having access to this information. I know for myself, when I was diagnosed, I couldn't find anything. And the things that it's not true that I couldn't find anything, but the things that I were finding, they weren't specific to my situation. And some of the suppositions that were in the content that I was reading, there was no ubiquitous or global truth to what was being said. So that's why I decided to write this book, from the context of a counselor offering frameworks and asking questions.
Okay, so you heard him. That is stonegye.com, STONEGYE.com. And he said it is free. So go out there and make use of it. Let it help you change the way that you look at yourself and the world around you, because it sounds like it has the framework, or I used your word, framework, to do that very thing.
Yeah. I recommend that when people read it, that they use it as part of a collaborative. I share it with a lot of other counselors that are working with neurodiverse people, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, so that they can use that as a framework with their clients. Mm-hmm. So if rather than just doing talk therapy, so there are exercises that are in the book that people can collaborate on as a group, as part of the community.
I love it. All right. So, gentlemen, we are coming up on the top of the hour. Any last thoughts for those that are listening in on us before we say adieu for the week?
Yeah, I guess the one thing that I want people to get, if I were to summarize our conversation, is that your mind and your way of being, your rhythm, is not a mistake. They're instructions for a life that only you can live. And our work, our time on this planet, is not to conform, but to become fully and unapologetic, you know the word I'm trying to say.
Yes, sir.
Unapologetically our own human. So for us to design that for ourselves, that's what I want people to walk away with, because that's all there is. Don't let someone else define for you how this meat sack is meant to experience the world and live.
Jeremy?
At the end of the day, we all have different DNA. If you really think about it, encoded in that DNA is what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to be. The point is, nobody can tell you who you are. You have to think and find that out for yourself. Nobody else can tell you that, because no one else has your DNA. Nobody else has the guide to living your life. So be introspective. Think about what it is. At the end of the day, just take time to think.
Well, this has been another episode of Neurodivergent News Live as we come towards the top of the hour. Be a fully realized person, y'all. And yes, that's my Southern word for the day, y'all. Go out there and be not just you, but be a community too. We will see you same time, same place next week. Enjoy all of our lovely commercials as we come fully to the top of the hour. Everybody have a glorious day.
You got control of me, break my barricades.